It's the mop, not the wop. What's going on, good people? Get on in here, get on in here. This is the second episode of Mop Talks. And this one gonna be special, y'all. There's a lot going on in the realm of public discourse. What's going on, Piggy? What I think would be a good thing for us to do today would be to go down, not quite a rabbit hole, but basically let's get a thorough understanding of the persuasive power of fallacies. As you see in the chat, that's the research I did this week that I compiled that we're going to be teaching from today. And the title of this lecture is going to be The Persuasive Power of Fallacies and How Logic is Hijacked in Urban Media and Hip Hop. And like I say, with everything that's going on today, man, it's important that we do this. You know what I mean? You'll understand where once we get into it, there's a lot of logical fallacies and well, let me pull it back. There's an art to arguing. There's an art to communication. And if you don't understand it, a motherfucker could easily use dirty tricks of the art to deceive you into thinking that what they saying is actually credible and valid. So what I want to do today, I want to teach the different types of informal fallacies that you'll encounter, especially on the internet, from politicians, from specifically today we're going to be talking about in the podcast and live streaming space, but it's applicable throughout, man, and almost everything you're going to be dealing with in life. And once you understand the tactics and how they're applied, you'll be able to spot that shit and analyze it and dismantle that shit. I'm gonna give y'all some tools you can use. One second, y'all. Sunshine, what's going on? But yeah, man. Without further ado, and like I said, it's pinned in the chat, the Substack, the article that we're gonna be teaching from today. But with that being said, in contemporary urban media, particularly within the unmoderated environments of podcasts and live streams, the mechanics of discourse have shifted from a foundation of sound reasoning to a performative struggle for influence. Within this arena, logical fallacies are not flaws in an argument, but they're deliberately deployed as a strategic instrument to achieve rhetorical dominance. This analysis moves beyond simple identification to a functional examination of how these fallacious tactics serve to dismantle an opponent's credibility, misrepresent their position, and build a speaker's own authority through presumption and emotional appeal. I'm not even, I gotta say it, the fellow who lost his life yesterday, the tools you're gonna spot, what I'm gonna cover in this today, you will, if you haven't already, you'll be able to spot this shit. You'll be able to see this shit a whole lot clearer, and how people have built their entire platforms off the premise of fallacies. A primary rhetorical objective in this context is the strategic dismantling of an opponent's ethos or their perceived credibility and character. The ad hominem fallacy is a key tactic in this regard, attempting to invalidate a position by attacking a person, presenting it rather than, excuse me, it's where you attack a person, presenting rather than the logic of their argument. And this can manifest as a direct personal attack, such as criticizing a politician for not growing up in the town they seek to represent, or a circumstantial ad hominem, which causes the source's motives based on their particular circumstances. So, in an unmoderated discussion, a speaker might use this tactic to immediately to shift the focus from a difficult question to a personal assault, making the opponent seem untrustworthy regardless of the validity of their point. A specific and potent variant of this is the courtier's reply. And this is where a critic's argument is dismissed on the grounds that they lack the necessary knowledge or credentials to comment on the subject. Effectively, that invalidates their position without ever even having to address it. And similarly, the appeal to authority fallacy is weaponized to bypass the needs of verifiable evidence or information. This occurs when a speaker cites a figure or dubious or relevant expertise to support a claim. They trade a rational proof for an unsupported assertion. For instance, a person might reference a personal anecdote from a non-expert, like my Uncle Bill, a hunter, says companies have no right to prevent guns on their property. And they'll do that to lend an unwarranted weight to that claim. Now, in the absence of a moderator to enforce logical standards, this tactic functions to create a superficial sense of authority that can be persuasive to an audience that trusts the speaker's social circle over a body of evidence. Now, the application of these fallacies demonstrates a profound shift from the classical purpose of ethos, which is to demonstrate a virtuous and knowledgeable character, to a modern, more strategic function, which is to win a popularity contest by making an opponent appear flawed or untrustworthy. This deliberate manipulation of the perceived credibility is a more memorable and persuasive tactic in short-term live format than a rational sound argument. And that's how they start that off. And those are your fallacies of credibility. And like I say, that's how a motherfucker tries to come for your credibility or your character, to use that as the basis for why what you're talking about or what they have to say is greater or more grander than what you say. Now I want to talk about the different misrepresentation and diversion fallacies. This second class of strategic fallacies, they revolve around misrepresentation and diversion, with the aim of controlling the narrative and forcing the opponent to argue on the speaker's chosen ground. The straw man fallacy is a prime example of this, wherein a speaker misrepresents or oversimplifies an opponent's argument to create a weaker, more easily refutable version of it. For example, a proposal for more environmental regulations might be framed as a desire to shut down all factories. And that allows the speaker to attack this exaggerated claim instead of the original, more complex one. Complementing this is a red herring fallacy, and this is a pure diversionary tactic. This involves introducing an irrelevant but emotionally captivating point to shift the focus away from a difficult or losing argument. The strategic deployment of these fallacies transforms the debate into a performative rather than a substantive exchange. So when a speaker is confronted with a difficult question, they can employ a straw man to pivot to a different topic, or a red herring to emotionally engage the audience with a separate issue. The speaker would resort to these fallacies when the goal of achieving common agreement is more important than using sound reasoning. So, if challenged, a speaker can further employ this Moat and Bailey fallacy, where the moat is where they set out this outrageous position that they have. And then from there, they fall back, and the Bailey is where they fall back to a more reasonable position if the moat doesn't work. And then they'll basically conflate between the two. And it creates this chaotic dynamic where the opponent is perpetually on the defense, and the audience is not given a chance to critically evaluate any single point. Now, I want you to understand how, as we talking about these fallacies and shit, how nothing about them bring you closer to actual true engagement in a discussion or something like that. So a motherfucker can use, and we got, those are just the first two. A person could use these logical fallacies and employ them and never truly engage you on what you're talking about, and still, to, like I say, to an unmoderated audience, to a motherfucker who is not being clarified, hey, that's bullshit what he's saying, you know what I mean, because of biases and shit like that, people are just go with it. Oftentimes, really only in academic circles, well, let me put it out. You have three types of rhetoric. You have ethos, which is about credibility, pathos, which is about pathos, we'll come back to that. Bear with me, y'all. Logos is related to logic, and pathos is presumption, or basically it's unwarranted generalizations, and that's what we getting into now. In the absence of a formal structure or moderator, speakers can use fallacies of presumption to build a veneer of credibility by leveraging anecdotal experience. The hasty generalization fallacy, which involves drawing a broad conclusion from one or few examples, is a central tool for this. In urban media context, anecdotal evidence like "I saw it happen" is often presented as a substitute for verifiable data, trading in personality for perceived sincerity and personal experience. This strategy, known as authenticity, is a rhetorical device that appeals to an audience's desire for genuine lived experience. Anecdotal evidence can be more persuasive than data-driven evidence due to the psychological preference for personal stories over impersonal statistics. This makes claims like the streets a powerful rhetorical tool for building ethos, as they present a local, unproven assertion as a universal truth, masquerading a flawed argument as a genuine insight. Other fallacies in this category include the slippery slope, which evoke fear of an inevitable negative cascade of events without any supporting evidence. This bypasses a rational argument by manufacturing a sense of urgency. Now, the false dilemma, or the either-or fallacy, is also used to coerce an audience into a specific line of thinking by presenting a complex issue as only having two extreme opposing outcomes, thereby obscuring a more complex reality. And an example of that is when basically you either in or you out, or you either with me or you against me. And And I'll just say this, man. If a motherfucker telling me you gotta choose the front door or the back door, just know there's always a window. But from there, man, I want to go into the socio-cultural and the media context of this, and the arena of how this shit is incentivized and becomes the mainstay of what is presented loud enough and at a volume that's high enough that a lot of people would internalize it and believe it. 1 minute, y'all. The deployment of these fallacious strategies is not an isolated phenomenon, but it's a deeply embedded in a specific socio-cultural and media environment in which they occur. The very format of live streams and podcasts, coupled with the rhetorical function of cultural claims, it creates an arena where certain forms of discourse are not just allowed, but they are actively incentivized. The contemporary urban podcast or live stream is a remediation of traditional radio. It's blending audio-based format with the interactive network-based communication of digital platforms. This format offers a low-cost, direct, and personal connection between creator and listener. The immediacy of this live setting, along with features like live chat and donation, it creates a reward-based system where a speaker's success is directly tied to their ability to elicit strong, emotionally charged reactions from the audience. The primary goal of this system is to maximize user engagement. That translates into profitability for the platform. Now, the research that I've done indicates that social media algorithms, and by extension, the entire live stream ecosystem, prioritizes content that sparks high arousal emotions such as anger, outrage, and amusement. This reward structure creates a direct incentive to use provocative, often fallacious arguments that will generate likes, comments, and shares, rather than nuanced sound reasoning. The result is a fundamental shift in the goal of discourse from truth-seeking to virality, where the most outrageous claims are algorithmically promoted over the most truthful ones. Claims about the streets or the hood or this and that function as a powerful rhetorical device to build a specific type of ethos rooted in cultural relevance and lived experience. This strategy leverages a form of in-group credibility that separates the speaker from a perceived out-group or formal experts or institutions. It's a form of cultural colloquialism using casual speech, slang, and narrative style to make the speaker appear more real or more knowledgeable than those who speak in a conventional academic manner, kind of like what I'm doing now. In this context, a speaker's authority is derived not from institutional credentials, but from their claimed connections to a specific community and a lived understanding of its dynamics. The weaponization of the narrative and how these cultural products turn into legal instruments. And that's the bigger problem for us. Now, like I say, the persuasive power of fallacies, it has a deep-seated impact on society as a whole. How, as we've discussed, how it's been incentivized to, as a way to get out of environments and predicaments. Like I say, it turns into a catch-22. And that's what I want to move into now. The rhetorical functions of cultural claims in media, they take on a far more profound and sinister dimension when they're viewed through a historical and legal lens. The analysis demonstrates how these cultural narratives intended to build credibility and express social critiques can be weaponized by external institutions and create dangerous feedback loops of surveillance and criminalization. Now we want to get into the history of malicious intent, where government and the surveillance of dissent is concerned. Now, the United States has a documented history of government actions with malicious intent towards specific demographics. The history is exemplified by the FBI's COINTELPRO, which was a series of covert and illegal projects from 1956 to 1971, designed to surveil, infiltrate, discredit, and disrupt American political organizations, politically those within Black communities. The program employed tactics of psychological warfare, including planting false media stories and spreading misinformation to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize these movements. This historical context of institutional harassment and surveillance provides a critical framework for understanding how modern forms of data collection can be used to target specific communities. Let's talk about music as a rhetorical tool and its criminalization. Cultural products like music have long served as powerful rhetorical tools for expressing emotion, shaping identity, and conveying political and social critiques. From its early origins, hip-hop in particular has been a vibrant venue for enunciating critiques of social and political forces. However, the advent of open source intelligence, or OSINT as we'll call it for the remainder of this video, has created a dangerous intersection that becomes, between the cultural expression and the legal system. Law enforcement agencies now rely heavily on the OSINT. They use publicly available information from social media and video platforms like Nojumper, Poetic Flacco, Trap Lord Ross, Seti Nash, 1090 Jake, to aid in criminal investigations. A profound sociological feedback loop has emerged from this practice. The analysis indicates that the very cultural expressions that serve as a source of credibility in media debate become the source of legal peril in the courtroom. Rap lyrics, music videos, what was said in interviews, which are rich in figurative language, hyperbole, and metaphor, are being selectively collected and presented as evidence of a defendant's bad character, criminal motive, or gang affiliation. The legal system often misinterprets these rhetorical devices literally, taking fictional personas and verbal duels as a factual admission of guilt. This practice, which is disproportionately applied to young Black and Latino men, effectively criminalizes a cultural product. This process reinforces a cycle of criminalization by leveraging pre-existing social biases and misinterpreting a form of artistic expression as a confession of proof or of a criminal disposition. The final layer of analysis addresses the ethical implication of these rhetorical strategies, exploring how the intent behind their use and their eventual viral outcome interact to influence public perception. The ethical assessment of a fallacious argument must first consider its intent. While some uses of logical fallacies may be for satire or entertainment, others are vehicles for malicious misinformation. Satire is a form of deception that intentionally includes cues revealing its own deceptiveness and it's aiming to critique a folly or punish an evil by mocking it. In contrast, malicious misinformation is designed to instill a false belief in the audience, benefiting the deceiver as long as the falsehood remains undiscovered. The unmoderated nature of live urban media makes it difficult for an average viewer to differentiate between these intents. A speaker's use of fallacious argument for entertainment or to engage in spectacle can be misinterpreted as a deliberate attempt at deception, while a true misinformer can hide behind the guise of a debater to sow confusion. I don't know if y'all seen it yet, but think Adam 22. The ethical perception of an argument is profoundly influenced by its outcome, especially if it goes viral. Virality is not a measure of truth or ethical soundness. It's a measure of emotional resonance and shareability. The social media reward system, through its algorithms, systematically promotes content that triggers high arousal emotions such as anger, outrage, and amusement over other content that is simply sad or neutral. This creates a moral hazard where speakers socially and financially rewarded by employing ethical and dubious and logically flawed arguments. The virality of a clip acts as a form of social proof, or ad populum fallacy, where the audience may interpret its popularity as a sign of its validity. This disconnect between the logical merit of an argument and its real-world success fundamentally corrodes the quality of public discourse. Think Whack 100 and DJ Academics and how the messages that they put out there and how they get proliferated on YouTube through their media teams that will just pump out high volumes of disinformation and misinformation, to the fact that even when learning models go to do their next training sessions, there's so much of that information that shit, it'll get internalized as the truth there as well. My analysis of this contemporary urban media discourse reveals a complex and often perilous landscape where the classic principles of rhetoric have been distorted by the modern digital environment. Logical fallacies, once considered flaws in reasoning, have become deliberate, strategic tools. Unmoderated live format of platforms like podcasts and live streams incentivizes speakers to use these fallacies, as they are highly effective at generating high arousal emotional engagement that the algorithms prioritize. The goal of discourse is thereby shifted from reaching a truth-based consensus to achieving a virality-based victory. This dynamic is particularly fraught for speakers who leverage claims of street authenticity to bear their ethos. And while this rhetorical stance functions to establish credibility within a specific community, the very cultural pop products that express this authenticity, music, language, and the shared narratives, are then harvested by external institutions through open source intelligence. The legal system operating within its own biases often misinterprets the rhetorical hyperbole and metaphor of these cultural products as literal evidence of criminality. That creates this vicious feedback loop. The media environment rewards a style of discourse that in turn provides fodder for a legal system with a history of targeting the same communities for surveillance and criminalization. The consequences is the profound and systemic criminalization of cultural expression. In conclusion, this is not a new form of debate. It's a new dangerous arena where rhetoric, media, culture, and law exist as a continuous feedback loop. The virality of a clip is not a testament to its truth, but it's now the ability to trigger emotional responses. And this reality places significant burden on the media consumer to navigate. You got to navigate this landscape actively. You have to critically understand the mechanics at play, or you'll be deceived into thinking misinformation is factual. The ability to deconstruct these narratives, recognize the fallacies and their functions, and to comprehend the broader socio-cultural implication is essential for preserving the integrity of public discourse and mitigating the real-world harm that can result from its performative deceptions. Now, what's going on, y'all? I don't know if you know, I don't know if y'all was following along. That is the moral of the story. And now I got something else. I have some tools for y'all. Give me just a second. I got some tools on how we combat. Yeah, Dubs from Back Block, get your bitch ass on. Don't come back. Yeah. Anyways, bear with me just 1 minute. I got I want to talk about the contemporary cases in the criminalization of these expressions. I'm gonna take 4 pivotal cases and explore the specific evidence used, the legal and sociological implications, and the pervasive role of online media in each. The case studies illustrate how prosecutors build their arguments by selectively interpreting cultural products and digital footprints to reinforce prejudicial narratives. What up, Uriah? I want to start with the YNW Melly case. This is a quintessential example of how an artist's creative work is used to construct a legal narrative of guilt. The central piece of evidence introduced by the prosecution was Murder on My Mind. Prosecutors focused on the second verse of the track where Melly recounts shooting a man and holding him as he passed. They presented this lyrical content not as fictional narrative, but as a literal confession to the murder of 2 of his friends. The use of this specific verse was not unprecedented. A state attorney previously used the lyrics read aloud in the 2017 to encourage his reincarceration for his probation violation before that even came along. The prosecution's narrative bolstered by a collection of non-lyrical digital evidence, which included cell phone records tracing Melly's location on the day of the murders, the direct messages in which he inquired about a CXR, and the video surveillance footage showing him entering the car in the same seat that the DNA suggests that the gunshots were fired from. The creative expression and the digital metadata form this symbiotic relationship. And the viral nature of Murder on My Mind, widely discussed on platforms like Reddit, YouTube, everywhere else you look, created a pre-existing public narrative that the prosecution could tap into. The lyrics are already imbued with a literal meaning by public conjecture and media attention, made the interpretation of the digital metadata seem more plausible. The song became a prejudicial lens through which the jury was encouraged to view all other evidence. Effectively, it transformed creative expression into public record right for prosecution to reframe it. The legal strategy exposes the fundamental bias in the justice system. The defense's argument that rappers lie in their lyrics all the time highlights a critical issue. The prosecution's argument requires that the court and jury ignore artistic license and genre conventions and apply literal standard to a predominantly black art form that would be unthinkable for other genres like rock or folk music. This selective application of a literal interpretation reinforces harmful stereotypes of black men as inherently violent and untrustworthy, creating this prejudicial environment that can significantly influence a jury's verdict. The systemic nature of this bias has prompted calls for legislative actions with prominent artists like Jay-Z and Meek Mill. They supported state bills aiming for limited use of lyrics as evidence in courts. The deeper implication of the case is that the crime scene has expanded beyond the physical location to encompass an entire online ecosystem, including artists' creative output and the public's response to it. Then let's go to Atlanta and look at the YSL RICO trial. The indictment on the YSL collective illustrates a more expansive form of the weaponization of cultural products. The prosecutors leveraged the RICO Act to indict Young Thug and other members of his group, arguing that YSL was not a record label but a violent street gang. The prosecution's case relied heavily on a collection of 17 different lyrics from tracks by Young Thug and other artists within the collective, presenting them as direct evidence of a criminal enterprise. Specific lyrics were framed as proof of gang membership, criminal acts, rituals. For instance, Killing 12 shit from the song Slime Shit was interpreted as a boast about shooting police, while the line, "You wanna be slime, go catch a body," from Really Be Slime was presented as an initiation requirement for the gang. Prosecutors attempted to legitimize the use of these lyrics by citing legal precedent, where white supremacist lyrics were used to demonstrate a defendant's skinhead beliefs. Go figure. This comparison seeks to strip the art form of its First Amendment protections by equating it with a universally condemned ideology. The maneuver, if successful, it normalizes the use of artistic expression as evidence of a propensity to commit a crime, a concept typically inadmissible in court. The legal strategy in that case, it wasn't just an attack on a specific group of artists, but a systemic effort to criminalize an entire artistic genre and subculture. The defense argued that the lyrics were protected artistic speech and that their use were both racist and discriminatory. The use of RICO effectively blurs the lines between music collective and criminal syndicate, creating a significant chilling effect on artistic freedom. This practice sends a clear message to artists and their communities that your creative work can be repurposed to dismantle your entire social and professional network and making you legally vulnerable for those expressions. The vast presence of YSL collective, the online presence, I'm talking about the music, the videos, the social media activity, public collaborations, all that. That provided the raw material for prosecution to construct a sweeping narrative of a criminal enterprise. And this demonstrates how the sheer volume of public digital footprints can be used as a fodder for legal action. Now let's talk about Lil Durk. The case against Lil Durk introduces a new and particularly troubling dimension to this trend. The weaponization of a third-party, fan-created media as incriminating evidence. The prosecution has accused the rapper Dirk Banks of orchestrating a murder-for-hire plot. In their case, they pointed to lyrics from a song titled Wonderful Wayne and Jack Boy as proof of his involvement. The defense has moved to dismiss the case, arguing the lyrics were written months before the alleged crime, making a literal interpretation impossible. A more significant development, however, is the prosecution's use of fan-made content. Specifically, there was a video spliced together of Dirk's lyrics with Quando Wando's voice and footage from the crime scene. This fundamentally challenges the traditional notion of legal culpability. Dirk's legal team has argued that this evidence is false, misleading, and that the artist has no connection to the individual who created the footage. This practice attempts to hold an artist legally accountable for the actions of their fans and the viral nature of their work. Effectively, the causal chain is no longer just art prosecution. It now becomes artist, art, fan content prosecution. The artist is no longer in control of the meaning or application of their work once it enters the public digital domain, which makes it nearly impossible to mitigate this new form of legal risk. This approach blurs the line between the artist, the fan, the content creator, and it transforms the entire online community into a potential source of incriminating evidence. Online platforms like Nojumper and 1090 Jake and those others are used by law enforcement as a source of fodder for legal investigations. The platform's very design, which incentivizes the sharing and of this content, is exploited to build a narrative of criminal intent. The distributed weaponization of cultural products represents a profound challenge to the notion of legal responsibility, where an individual can be held liable not for their own actions, but for how their creative work is recontextualized by others in the public sphere. And it just becomes insidious and, man. Now, let's look at the legal proceedings against Big U and how they demonstrate the weaponization of a cultural figure's persona and community ties. We're going to extend the analysis beyond a specific artistic output. Big U was a respected figure in Los Angeles music scene or just urban scene, and is a mentor to the late Nipsey Hussle. I'm forgetting his name right now. Corrupt and countless others. He was indicted on federal RICO charges, including racketeering, fraud, and the alleged murder of a rapper who recorded a diss song against him. The prosecutors are framing him as a rap godfather and the leader of a mafia-like criminal operation. The prosecution's core argument isn't based on his artistic expression, but on his cultural identity and his digital content from that. His long-standing ties to the Rolling 60s, his work in the music industry and his persona as a community leader were used to construct a narrative of a criminal enterprise. The legal argument frames his cultural capital and public identity not as a separate part of his life, but as the very mechanism through which the alleged criminal activities are being conducted. This approach sends a chilling message to anyone who has worked hard to reform their lives and contribute to their community. It suggests that a person's past, history, and identity can be used as essential evidence against them in a criminal trial, legally penalizing them for their cultural history and associations of it. Online media, including news clips and headlines, WAC 100, 600, they played a crucial role in amplifying the narrative of a mafia-like operation, influencing public perception and creating a context in which the RICO charges seem justified. This case exposes the weaponization of identity, where an individual's public persona, shaped by their history and the community roles, can be constructed by prosecutors as the central evidence of their guilt. This represents a profound shift from prosecuting actions to prosecuting identity. Now, the implications of these trends are far-reaching. By allowing the prosecution to interpret lyrical content as factual confessions and interviews, Instagram lives, and all this shit, it legitimizes prejudicial narrative that a person's art and their persona are a direct reflection of their criminal propensity. And like I say, this all goes back to how initially you can't even get in the door without proving your authenticity. And that just creates this trap. So I want to kind of piece together what we talked about here today. So the logical fallacies is how they get you to think that their lies or their misinformation is valid or true. And as we stated, they use fallacies of credibility, fallacies of misrepresentation and diversion, fallacies of presumption and unwarranted generalization. They use these to shape the narrative in a way that supports their angle, and it, like I say, it doesn't have to be founded in reality. And if you're just doing that for entertainment, that's one thing. But the problem happens when you use these tactics to push stereotypes, like I say, malicious misinformation. When it's used to promote, when logical fallacies are used to promote propaganda and malicious misinformation, that is a threat to, as we've discussed, public discourse. Because like I say, a person can immediately say, you're not from here, or you're not even a this or that, so you can't even speak on this. You can't even speak on this. And what that does is, so if you had a good point about whatever it is, it could be a function or a field of the workforce. It could be about music. It could be about the street world. It could be about being a preacher. A motherfucker can easily dismiss you. Well, they'll start off, this is why I say, like when I was talking about the courtier's reply, they'll start off by dismissing your sentiments on the basis that you're not credible. And then from there, what they do is, the next step is to misrepresent what your position is. And so you'll say, like I say, you may say, well, let me use this example. I will use Hocus Focus, or whatever dude name is. My boy going through a RICO right now, and it makes a lot of sense for a cornucopia of reasons that a motherfucker denounces affiliations. Get away from that. Immediately what you see the internet do is conflate it and create this straw man argument to say, oh, you don't tell us on the West Coast what to do. Or you can't tell, you make it about something else that undermines the essence or the actual or what a person's actual position. And I don't want to go too far down there because I just don't want to pigeonhole like that. We could be talking about that all day. But once they can make the conversation about, or they can make your argument, they can change what your argument is to the public. Now, one or two things, now there's one or two pitfalls that you can make from that. You can either fall into it and engage on an argument that was never yours, or you can just, if you don't, you can either engage on from their position, or you can have an emotional response that basically takes you away from what you were talking about initially. And once that's done, then they can lay down, or if that's not effective, if that works or if it doesn't work, then you lay down unwarranted generalizations to strengthen your strengthen the misrepresentations and diversions. And you'll notice this shit, especially with Adam 22. He's a master at it. I ain't gonna lie, you'll notice this shit on Apollo as well. And this is a great example of what I'm saying. If you watched Apollo, it's all logical fallacy. That's all they doing is logical fallacy, but it's not to misinform or for negative, none of that shit. It's just a form of, it's kind of like cheap debate. It's unmoderated debate to where who's gonna come out victorious, but there's no ploy to subvert how you see certain shit, you know what I mean, critical shit in society. Whereas you look at Nojumper and Adam 22 and Poetic Flacco and Whack 100, these people, they use these same tactics, but it's to undermine the culture that they supposed to be representing, or not representing, but on behalf of, if you will. Bear with me, y'all. 1 second. Yeah, man. But what I'm saying is, the reason these motherfuckers are doing what they doing, Nojumper, they're trying to, they OSS for real. It comes back to the O sense. So we spoke about how open source intelligence is the primary source of how law enforcement is solving cases in current age. So when Wack 100 and his Clubhouse 101, Ray Gibbs TV, all the plethora of different channels that he has a part of his media team, that when they have a conversational Clubhouse, which is the epitome of unmoderated debate, that gets siphoned to YouTube and proliferated across multiple channels. So now you have a platform like Clubhouse, which is the concentration is literally like the essence of logical fallacy and unmoderated debate, where all you gotta do, I'm trying to attack it right. I've never heard a reasonable, rational argument or discussion on that. Everyone is logical fallacy. It's rhetoric used deceptively to not get to sound reasoning, but to get to a victory of position. And like I say, when you have that as the extract or the concentrate, and then you take it to YouTube, because it only happens one time on Clubhouse, but when you got a media team with 10, 11, 12, 15 channels that'll take those clips and clip them and put them out, and sometimes they'll put them out 2 or 3 times with overlapping parts, you're proliferating this misinformation out there into the world, into the digital space. And it's not just for the consumers, or let me pull it back, we're all consumers. When law enforcement uses YouTube or any of these social media platforms to do it, they're consuming as well. With that, it's important, with everything we said, with everything we've talked about here today, that cognitive awareness of what you're doing and what you're saying. And I'm kind of shifting because you need to be aware of the logical fallacies and all that shit and how they working that shit on you. But you also need to be aware, especially if you make content or a digital creator or just make posts or comments, any of that shit can be used against you. You need to be cognitively aware of what you're saying, and the intent behind it. Maybe you are trying to deceive motherfuckers, and I've given you information here today. If you, in the documents it's pinned there, if you want to go study that shit, essentially it could tell you how to be a good deceiver. That would be you using this research for bad. I would hope you would. We got enough of that. However, you can use what I'm giving y'all today as a tool to not fall victim to this shit, in the sense of you criminally convicting, indicting yourself, or buying into misinformation that's not accurate. And we especially got that bad in the black community. I was gonna say Latino, but I can't speak for y'all. But we especially got that bad where motherfuckers will believe some shit a white motherfucker say. I'm not racist, so I'm not saying it in no way other than we know what Adam is and his intent served to our community. He uses the logical fallacy exactly in the fashion I've described, under the guise of he's for us, that he's a participant. He's literally leading us to the slaughter. and bringing motherfuckers on the platform, any violent, degenerate, anything like that can further the narrative that we're subhuman is gonna platform. I've been rambling at this point. I wanna get y'all on back to y'all regular scheduled programs, but before we do that, I do need to say, if you haven't already, buy my book. Buy my book, man. We over here on Amazon Kindle. It is in the unlimited Kindle program for maybe another 40 days or something like that. So you can read it for free. If you want to own it, it ain't but $2.99. But read my book, y'all. It's my first debut novella. It's about a promising college basketball player who was shot and paralyzed, and the path of redemption and reigniting the flame. It's a Prometheus story. Read it. Leave a review. Fuck with me, man. Outside of that, man, I appreciate everybody that clicked on the video, liked the video, everybody that subscribed to the channel. Shout out to everybody in the chat, my mods. Shout out to everybody who got here and didn't mean to get here but stayed anyways. Y'all who I really fuck with. Hey, Pancho the Bear, the bullshit that you looking for, which is what I think you're saying, we do that tomorrow. But Thursdays, I do a mop talks where we do some edification, and I try to, I do an in-depth research throughout the week, and I compile data, turn it into a report, and I use that to teach from on Thursday, something that it will be beneficial to us. And then on Fridays, we get to the bullshit. We're going to do the reactions, and we're going to talk some shit about these motherfuckers. That's what we do. So shout out to you, bro. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to all the new subscribers. Till next time, we gone.
Mopwack, what's happening with you? Mopwack, Mopwack.